One of the coolest parts about Street Beefs is you get to relive eras of combat sports. Like, in the beginning of UFC, nobody knew what was going to happen. Like, people had ideas, people were very sure, oh, my style is better than your style, the fighters from here better than the fighters from there, but nobody knew, and we were discovering it all together, all at the same time. But now, the fighters are so well known, and the divisions have rankings, and it's all very well documented. We still have surprises, but there's not a lot of mystery. Streetbeefs is an underground fight club on YouTube. They started out filming fights with flip phones in Scarface's backyard. Fast forward a few years and they have multiple chapters in different cities. They have mainstream crossover success and they have produced a lot of professional combat athletes and a superstar or two. But much like the UFC, early on, there was not a lot of women fighting in Street Beefs, believe it or not. This is what it looked like 6 years ago. 6 years ago on Street Beefs, these two women fought to settle a dispute over a man.
Let's go.
This is a sideshow. This is crazy. This is nuts. It's super entertaining. We got fingers over the lens. We got people that can't keep their balance. We got one smaller, scrappy female fighter and one larger, less scrappy female fighter. And the fight sucked. It sucked, but it was entertaining. The rules are crazy. She was only allowed to strike. She could hit her while she was on the ground, but she's not allowed to get on top of her. But you can see from the body language that they're not like super enthused about doing this anymore because fighting is hard. Fighting sucks. So as I zoom through the history of women fighting at Street Beefs, feel free to check out the playlist that I'm going to link at the end, which has all of these fights back to back to back, and you can kind of see. This was the first women's fight that I ever saw at Street Beefs, but this next one has one of my most favorite moments of any Street Beefs fight.
Oh, she kicked me in my...
What's really funny, you'll observe this a few times, you'll see that these women sort of like with this like non-committal body language. It happens more often in the women fights, especially between untrained people. Which, if you couldn't tell, these women don't have any combat sports training. I often compare Scarface to like a kindergarten teacher at these things, because when you're officiating fights between non-fighters, you know, you can't enforce the same rules. Like, just like with kids, like the rules for adults are more strict than the rules for kids because you can expect the adults should be able to follow them. But the rules with kids, they're just not, you can't be that strict if you want to get anything done. So shout out to Scarface for having to sort of like ride the throttle on the enforcement of the unified rules of mixed martial arts.
What's my hair? What's you pull my hair?
I didn't pull your hair?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, no shirt grabbing, no
She
hair
just
pulling.
pulled my hair again.
Keep...
Oh, my hair, my
Hey,
hair.
Okay, okay. Look, you did grab hair that time. This is the last one on the hair.
Hold on,
grab.
hold on.
But this right here, I have not seen this. I just queued this up to do this video. I've not seen this in a couple of years. Listen to what this woman says.
So that's
No, no, she kicked me in my thing.
It's just so funny. It's so absurd. I don't know. I guess when you watch thousands or maybe tens of thousands of fights, you get sort of jaded and cynical because the same things happen over and over again. But never, ever, ever has a sequence of events that were in this fight, never have they happened. Ever before, and probably will never happen again. Oh man, I loved that era of Street Beefs. But like I said, we get to relive eras of combat sports through Street Beefs. Remember when women's MMA first became a thing and you started seeing legit MMA fighters paired up against like not legit MMA fighters? You remember this one? This one went viral. But even in the UFC, they were putting their stars, their female stars, up against people that weren't even close to the level. Because in the beginning of any sport, the pool of athletes that you're pulling from is not as big. So it's not as competitive. You got people that are very good, people that suck. And I have to admit that I don't get it wrong a lot. But I remember when this fight happened, I watched the intros, which are always funny. I need to do a whole video on Street Beefs intros. Look at this. I saw her in the rash guard and the braids, and the other girl's just like dressed like she's going grocery shopping. And I thought, oh my God, this is about to be a mismatch. Look, she's turning her head. I thought for sure, okay, the lioness is about to wreck Fierce Honey. That's what I thought was going to happen. Then I realized, oh wait, the lioness is turning her head too. Oh, she don't like this either. Headlock takeover. Headlock takeover is OP in women's MMA for some reason. I think it has something to do with the centers of gravity. The girl on bottom had no answers. I thought she was like gonna be a legit jiu-jitsu girl. Maybe not have any striking, but maybe have some answers with the jiu-jitsu. But Fierce Honey beat the brakes off of that girl and then went on to have more fights in Street Beefs.
Don't get too aggressive. Keep going like this.
So shout out to Fierce Honey. I'm sorry I discounted you based on your fashion choices. Oh, by the way, that's not a sexist thing. Like I do that with the guys too. Like if their gear don't look right, I start making judgment calls. But speaking of mismatches, this is a proper one, and this is from Streetbeefs Scrapyard, which has become a burgeoning scene for female fights in Street Beefs. That's headed up by Fire Chicken here, out on the West Coast. This fight, again, we get to relive an era. Back when they were putting bums in there with people that knew how to fight. And this is a gross mismatch, both in size, experience level, skill. This is what MMA looked like. In the beginning, everybody sucked. And then in the middle, like, one guy sucked and one guy was good. That's how a lot of the fights played out. And I understand that this is a kickboxing match. I get it. I'm saying, generally speaking, combat sports. We'll say combat sports.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Fighter.
I'll give it to Volkova, though. She's tough and she can take a punch. You can see, and the fact that she's taken so many punches and taken such a beating and staying in there. I mean, she obviously has the mindset and the proclivities of a fighter, just not the training and the experience. And you can see that Not Your Average Girl not only has her physically outmatched with several attributes, but you can tell by the punch combinations and the kicks and the composure that she definitely knows what she's doing. She's definitely formally trained. This fight is just all, it's all Not Your Average Girl. Oh, beautiful push kick. Sits her down on her butt.
Push it, Darcy, push it. Second round, head kick KO. Only one more girls to fight.
Yeah. Come on, girls. Come out here.
And in that moment right there, Not Your Average Girl becomes an ambassador of women fighting in Street Beefs. And now we've seen that era where one person sucks and the other person doesn't. And that person that doesn't now needs competition. Well, this is the one, maybe this is the one that you came to see. This is the one I'm so impressed with. Not Your Average Girl, you got your wish.
I am Hostility. I'm thick, but I'm quick. I am Not Your Average Girl. I'm from Aberdeen, Washington.
So this might be not just one of the best women's matches in Street Beefs history. This might be the best kickboxing match. The performance that Hostility is about to put on. And you see she's dumping her. She's clearly got some Muay Thai clinch training. That was good. Fundamentals of how to sweep somebody. But if you watch throughout this fight, the tenacity and ferocity of Hostility coming forward against Not Your Average Girl, who's no slouch. Not Your Average Girl has a lot of attributes going for her. But if you look at that technique. If you know anything about any of the fighters from RKM, the history of Hard to Hurt, I would not be surprised. I'm going to go out on a limb. I would not be surprised if, stylistically speaking, Hostility and it has something in common. Like I think maybe like her coach and my coach. If you traced it back, I bet there's a shared coach somewhere. Because stylistically, it just looks too close to the style of kickboxing that we do around here. It's amazing. I don't know anything about her gym or her coaches, but just look at this composure and look at this aggression. And she started when she did her fighter interview, it's like a funny, kind of happy-go-lucky, fun person. But this is terrifying. And Not Your Average Girl probably has her way with all the girls that she trains with, spars with, and competes with. We saw in the last fight that she had such I won't say an easy time, but she had an easy time with that other girl. And now Hostility is nonstop in her face. Look at the footwork. Look at the angles. It's an amazing performance. This is one for the books, this scrap right here. And you see that Not Your Average Girl is getting rocked with these shots. And that probably doesn't happen to her a lot. But Hostility is doing what you're supposed to do when you fight a taller opponent. What Hostility does is she doesn't give up on the exchange just because she gets hit. Now we have a wardrobe malfunction. And you see Hostility's telling the ref, go ahead and get it. She's a good sport. She's composed. I don't know how much formal competition either of these women have. Like, when you're a woman and you don't fight at like 125 or maybe 135, it is difficult to find competition. In kickboxing, it can be a little easier. In boxing, it can be a little easier than MMA, but it's still tough for women. And if you look at that level of like professionalism, like she understands that she's not supposed to dump her there, or sweep her. She lets go of that leg. Hostility's done tons of reps in the gym. So she's either sparred a lot. If she hasn't competed, she's done a lot of sparring. Because this kind of composure and this kind of combination fighting is not just something that you get hitting the bag and pads. And so what Not Your Average Girl is supposed to be doing is stiff jabs, get some respect. But the problem is she just can't hurt Hostility enough to keep her from coming forward. Like, there's nothing in the way of Hostility coming forward. Yo, she's hurt. She's rocked. She gets herself back together and she throws hard. But Hostility can take a punch, man. And you can see both women breathing heavily, but I may have already said this, but one of the reasons that I like women's combat sports is they generally finish fights at a similar output to how they started. Now, there's reasons for that. That's kind of maybe the subject of another video. But generally, at the end of the fight, they're going to be fighting at about the same pace that they started the fight at, which to me makes the fights more interesting and more exciting. Whereas in men's combat sports, particularly as you get up in the weight classes, their output suffers considerably in the later rounds. Third round, little touch of gloves, and you just see Hostility gets better as it goes on. And I think Not Your Average Girl does as well. I think both ladies actually performed better in the third round than they had in previous rounds. But that was a good stiff jab. That's what Not Your Average Girl needs to do to win this fight. But you see, Hostility's got a granite chin. She doesn't back down just because she takes a good hit. And look, she's moving side to side, little small movements side to side. She's reaching for that kick because she's been able to predict, when Not Your Average Girl is going to kick and catch them. She's done a very good job of that. The coach in me would tell Not Your Average Girl she needs to feint the kick and punch, or question mark kick or something like that. But Hostility is just in her face. And look at that range that she's at. It's like close enough that you could swing at her, but her defense as she's coming forward is just too good. And that's what pressure fighting is. Pressure fighting is not really about offense. Obviously, Hostility's offense is great. Pressure fighting is about moving forward with defense and pressuring your opponent to make decisions. You're forcing them to choose between, hopefully, two undesirable outcomes. That's what pressure fighting is, and Hostility puts on pretty much a pressure fighting clinic. But look at this non-stop output from these ladies. This is what I'm talking about. We're in the last 10 seconds. Hostility's still coming forward, still finishing up with kicks. Not Your Average Girl still answering back. Wow. That's not a good fight for women. That's not a good fight for Street Beefs. That's a good fight with a period on it. That is a great fight. There's a story in that fight. There's drama in that fight. You have the shorter fighter trying to get to the taller fighter. Hostility, I think, had a little bit of a weight advantage. It matters less when she can't grab her and hold on to her. Initially she was slinging around. The referee warned her she's not allowed to do that. This fight represents the era that we're at now. We get to relive entering it. I believe that we're about to see stiffer and stiffer competition, particularly in the women's division of Street Beefs.